Hi guys, hi guys, Dr. Rahul this side. So today we will discuss about few topics from general medicine. So these topics is repeated, in most of your exams, as you know. First, I will take dipstick, then cystic fibrosis, then transient ischemic attack, Brodmann's area, tetani, diphtheria, rubella, WBW, and some acid base, some problems related to acid base disorders, right? So we will begin, right? So first let's take this dipstick. So in dipstick, mainly what is asked in your exam is dipstick analysis. Like they may ask you just interpret the proteinuria result. Like for example, say there is 3 plus proteinuria in 3 plus proteinuria in your dipstick, right? So what is the interpretation? What is the interpretation? 3 plus proteinuria in your dipstick. What is the interpretation? So dipstick is a bedside uh, test, as you know, and 3 plus proteinuria suggests that it is a nephrotic range type, right? So we will discuss about dipstick analysis. So say the options are given for 3 plus proteinuria. The options are given as 100 milligram per deciliter, or second option more than 1000, right, milligram per liter. Third option 300 milligram per deciliter. So we will discuss about the interpretation of the dipstick proteinuria, right? So if we discuss about the analysis part, see, when we say 1 plus proteinuria, so it comes almost like 30 milligram per deciliter for 1 plus proteinuria, right? For 2 plus, it is 100 milligram per deciliter. For 3 plus, it's 300 milligram per deciliter, and for 4 plus it is 1000 milligram per deciliter. So you have to remember these values, and 3 plus is asked mostly that what does this statement means that 3 plus proteinuria in dipstick, right? What is the interpretation? So remember the values, this has been asked. Okay, is important. Now I will move on to the next topic. Next topic I will take like cystic fibrosis. This is very important topic, and every exam this has been asked in some way or other, right? So mainly clinical feature has been asked and the genes involved. So we will look at it and we will try to solve a problem associated with it, right? So cystic fibrosis, right? First of all, it is a autosomal recessive condition, correct? And it is a exocrinopathy. Each and every word is important, pay attention, right? First of all, cystic fibrosis is a autosomal recessive condition and exocrinopathy, right? And the gene involved is CFTR gene. CFTR gene is cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator gene. I repeat, cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator gene, and chromosome number involved is 7, right? This all has been asked. Okay. Now we will go to the clinical features associated with the condition of cystic fibrosis, right? So talking about clinical features, first we'll go respiratory, right? See, respiratory we will see copious pulmonary secretions. Okay, copious pulmonary secretions will be there. There will be poor mucociliary clearance. Poor mucociliary clearance. Also, secondary infection with opportunistic organisms like Staphylococcus, right? Mostly. So there will be secondary infection, poor mucociliary clearance, and copious secretions. All these are important points. I'm just mentioning the salient points. Next, there will be pancreatic conditions associated, like pancreatic insufficiency, diabetes mellitus, right? And malabsorption. With first two being the important ones, insufficiency and diabetes mellitus, right? If we talk about other system involvement, we can see sinusitis, we can see infertility, we can see meconium ileus. Sinusitis, infertility, meconium ileus. MI is meconium ileus, right? Meconium ileus, right? And infertility. Then the important part is diagnosis. See, first of all, CFTR genotype, but this is not always required, right? We have an important part like sweat chloride test. If we can't diagnose with this, we will obviously go for this, but this is the gold standard. Okay, and this is practiced routinely, sweat chloride test. Obviously, where chloride level if 60 millimole per liter, then diagnostic, right? And the most important thing which has not been asked yet, but I hope this may be asked in the upcoming exams. Cystic fibrosis is a condition of hypochloremic metabolic alkalosis. Hypochloremic metabolic alkalosis. Each and every term is important. Mind you, it is not acidosis, alkalosis. Hypochloremic metabolic alkalosis. This is how we diagnose, and the features associated. I have discussed everything. So this has been asked. Please take note of it, right? Now, yes. So what? Let's practice a question like, if I say all are clinical feature in cystic fibrosis except, right? So always mark the word except, right? Number A, pancreatic insufficiency, right? Number B, decreased sodium and chloride in sweat, right? And number C, sinusitis. Number D, decreased mucociliary clearance. So of course, as I discussed, pancreatic insufficiency is a clinical feature, right? Sinusitis also is seen. Decreased mucociliary clearance, yes, this is also seen. Now this one, chloride, as I discussed, it is more than 60 millimole per liter. So obviously this option is incorrect, right? This is not seen, rest all are seen, correct? So we have discussed in our previous slide. Okay, let's move in our next topic, right? So here I will like to, one second, yes, I will like to discuss about TIA. TIA in short, right? Details I will discuss in neuro section, right? So if something is asked like that, after a TIA attack, right? After a TIA attack, when is the maximum risk of stroke? Maximum risk of stroke. So option A is given within 48 hours, option B within 1 month, option C 1 week, and option D 1 year. Very important, right? So we will discuss about TIA and the risk, right? So if I talk about TIA episode, right? So risk of stroke, TIA is transient ischemic attack, where there is a attack of stroke, but you say the patient has been admitted for stroke at the morning, and by the evening he will we can you will be discharged from hospital, right? That's why it's said as transient period, right? Transient ischemic attack. So risk of stroke is almost 10 to 15% in within 48 hours or in 2 days, right? And risk of stroke, we usually the score is ABCD2, where A is the age, right? B is for BP, C is complaints, and D for diabetes, right? So just remember these points. Both of these has been asked, right? The risk is 10 to 15% within 2 days, right? In brief, we will discuss in our neuro section, right? Today I'm taking the general part only, right? So next is I will talk about Bodman's area, which is important, right? Bodman's area. Recently, questions has been asked from this topic, right? So it should be very clear, right? So, like, if they ask what is the Broca's motor area, first of all, location is important, and also the area number is also important, right? So as option A, 44, 45, option B 22, option C 17, 18, and option D 4, 6. So Broca's area, as you know, it is in inferior frontal gyrus, right? And the location is, of course, 44, 45, right? Now we will see the location of the all the Bodman area, right? We will draw a figure and we will look at it, right? So let's draw. I expect you to draw with me, right? Then it will be clear. Okay, 1 second. Yes. So we will divide it into the three parts, right? In the just see, correct? Okay. Now we will level it, right? Let's just take another color. Yes, it's not visible. Yes. So this part is the frontal area, right? This is your parietal, and this is your temporal, this is your occipital, right? This we know. This part frontal, this is temporal, parietal, occipital. I have to rub it because we will level here, right? So frontal area I divided into three part, right? Now we will level it like yes. This is superior frontal gyrus, right? This is middle frontal gyrus. This is inferior frontal gyrus. Very important, right? Superior frontal, middle frontal, and inferior frontal gyrus. Now I will write this one area number with it, right? So middle frontal gyrus is area number 8. Middle frontal gyrus is area number 8, and this is your frontal eye field. Middle frontal gyrus area number 8, frontal eye field, right? And inferior frontal gyrus is area number 44, 45, and this is your Broca's area. And Broca's area is your motor area of speech. Broca's area is your motor area of speech, area number 44, 45, right? Then this is your area number 6. This part is area number 6, right? And this is your premotor area. Just for the completion's sake, area number 6, premotor area, right? Now this is your central sulcus of Ronaldo. Behind it is area number 4, and area number 4 is primary motor area. Primary motor area, which is behind the central sulcus of Ronaldo, and in front of it is area number 213, and this area number 213 is your primary somatosensory area. Okay. This is your superior parietal lobule. Above is area number 5 and 7, right, which is somatosensory association area, right. Now important part is this one, the temporal fields, which can be divided again into three parts: superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus, and inferior temporal gyrus. Important is superior temporal gyrus, where we have area number 22, right, area number 40, 41 and 42 as well, right. So area number 22, here it is important because here we have the Wernicke's area, which is the sensory area of speech. Wernicke's area, sensory area of speech in superior temporal gyrus, area number 22, right. And 41, 42 is your primary auditory area, and area number 17, 18 is also there for the completion part. It is your visual association area, right. So these are all your Bodman's area. I hope you are clear, right. So if we go here, this is your Broca's area, of course. This is your Wernicke's area. This is your visual area, right. And area number 4 is your primary motor area, right. And area number 6 is your premotor area. This and this is important, correct. Also remember that Broca's area and Wernicke's area is connected by arcuate fasciculus. Rest we will discuss in our neuroanatomy, right, again. Okay. Now we will discuss about Clostridium tetani, which causes tetanus, right. Okay, so I will discuss about clinical features mainly, right. So how will you identify a case of tetanus? Like there will be history of trismus. Trismus means locked jaw or masseter spasm, right. This will be number one. Number two is stiffness or chewing difficulty because your masseter muscle is spasm, right. And there can be dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing, or neck muscle spasm. Number third, very important, rhizus sardonicus, right, where there will be facial and buccal muscle spasm. And number four, opisthotonus, where I will write, one second, yes, number four, opisthotonus, where there will be hyperextension, right. So these points I want you to remember. And also in infection section I will discuss that when the toxoids has to be taken, right. This I will discuss in your infection section, right. Okay, now I will take you to diphtheria. Recently so many questions has been asked from this topic, right. So main areas of concern is your complication, then case scenario you have to identify, and management part. So we will take this into account. First I will say how you will identify a case of diphtheria. There will be a history of exudative pharyngitis. Often an image will be shown where in the tonsil, right, where in the tonsil there will be shown white colored exudate, and a history will be given that it is usually a unilateral condition where there will be exudate above the tonsil, and if you try to rub it there will be bleeding, right. So that history will be given, or that image can be given along with a bull neck, swelling of the neck on one side, right. So this is the history part, right. Talking about the complications, this is an important portion because complication may be divided into early and late. Like questions may be asked and has been asked, like which is not a late complication of diphtheria or which is not an early complication of diphtheria. This is important portion, that's why, right? So remember that early complication of diphtheria includes laryngeal spasm, right? Laryngeal spasm, then myocarditis, right? Husky voice. These are early complication. Late complication includes arrhythmia, again myocarditis, cardiac failure, paralysis, and peripheral neuropathy, right? So paralysis and peripheral neuropathy, actually these are late complications, to remember this point. And why there is myocarditis or cardiac failure? Because the diphtheria antigen, right, immediately after entering the body, the diphtheria releases a toxin particularly towards the myocardium, means towards the heart tissue, right? So that's why we find myocarditis, and that's why it is a drastic condition, right? Also important part is management. Like if the patient is available within 48 hours of the infection, we have to give, see, immediately we have to give antitoxin because of that myocarditis thing. To prevent it to the development of myocarditis, immediately you have to give antitoxin. Now how much antitoxin we will give? Obviously if the patient arrives within 48 hours, we will give 80,000 to 1 lakh, or you can say less than 1 lakh international unit antitoxin. But if the patient is available after 48 hours, within after 48 to 72 hours, right, then we will give more than 1 lakh international unit antitoxin. I have also discussed it in my microbiology this one session, right? I am repeating it here, right? And also we will give antibiotics, right? Antibiotics also is an important part of diphtheria treatment. Next I will go to congenital rubella syndrome. Recently we saw questions from it. This is an important topic as well. Now the important portion is triad. Congenital rubella syndrome has a triad. It has three things. First is sensory neural deafness. Sensory neural deafness, right? Number one. Number two is cataract, and number three is cardiac malformations, mostly patent ductus arteriosus. Cataract, deafness, and patent ductus arteriosus, right? Remember this triad has been asked so many times, right? And how will you diagnose IgM in blood? This point is also important. Not IgG or IgA, it's IgM in blood, right? Okay. Next topic, I decided to take WPW syndrome. See, I will take it short here because I already took this segment in my ECG video, right? So which is available, so you can go and watch. It's just a 20 minutes video. Everything has been discussed there, relevant to your exam, right? So regarding WPW syndrome, the main concern is there is a bypass tract, right? What we say as bundle of Kent, through which excess excess action potential reaches the atrium, and we get something known as delta wave, right, which is like this before the PR, right? So actually here PR is less than 0.12 second, first thing, and second is the delta wave, right? Talking about now, these two is important, and this one you have to identify, right? Now the most important thing is about the management. The treatment part is flecainamide, right? Flecainamide is the treatment, but see, this is the treatment part, but absolute treatment is we have to cut the tract, right? Surgery is the absolute treatment, because so long the tract is there, so long the tract is available, the action potential will continue to trigger the extra bit, like, so we have to do surgery, and that remains the absolute treatment, right? Okay. Now in general medicine, another important topic is there, from where question is asked almost in every exam, and many people are confused with this, like acid base disorders. So this also I took a class of 10 minutes, you please attend that. And here also I will discuss few points about that, right? See, to discuss means to solve the questions of acid base disorders, we have to know few normal values, right? Normal values of our pH, which is 7.2 to 7.4, right? If it is less than 7.2, we say this as acidosis. More than 7.4, we say this as alkalosis. Good. So like this, right? We have to remember that normally 7.2 7.4, less than 7.2 acidosis, more than 7.4 alkalosis. First we will see the normal and then we can diagnose the abnormal things, right? Talking about our PCO2, right? Partial pressure of carbon dioxide. This is a respiratory thing, right? So whatever acidosis alkalosis we will discuss is based on respiratory only. First, this is clear, right? Here normal value is 40 to 42 millimeter mercury, correct? When the value, say they give it less than 40 or more than 42, how it will change the scenario? If they give it less than 40 or more than 42, how will it change the scenario of the question or the choices we choose? See, if it is more than 42, always keep in mind they are talking about respiratory acidosis. Good, right? And the opposite in if it is less. Okay, just remember one part, you can remember the other also, right? If they say that bicarbonate, now bicarbonate is a, remember it is associated with metabolic condition, either metabolic acidosis or metabolic alkalosis. Now its normal value is 22 to 28 milli equivalent per liter. Okay, now say it is less or it is more in the question, right? How it will change the scenario? Like if it is more, this time it will become metabolic alkalosis. So you understood? And the reverse here, if it is less, if PCO2 is more than 42, it will become respiratory acidosis. But if bicarbonate is more than 28, it is becoming metabolic alkalosis. Now this you will fit with the pH, right, that we saw here. This PCO2 and bicarbonate condition, you will fix it with the normal pH. Whatever matches with the pH, that one will be the condition, and the opposite parameter will be compensatory. I will give you an example and then we will understand the thing, right? Like say the blood pH is for example it is say it is 7, right? And now I will give a scenario about CO2 and this one bicarbonate, right? Values remain same, sorry, unit remains same, right? They will not change. So I will give the values, just try to solve it and then we will right, discuss about it, right? So pH is 7.0, right? PCO2 say it is 45, right? And bicarbonate say it is 30. So what is the condition? Now in such case, never look at the choices, because they will give metabolic acidosis with compensatory alkalosis or metabolic alkalosis with compensatory respiratory acidosis. You will be confused. The four options can be given and you will be confused if you go, means if you look at the options first. Always you find the answers by yourself and then find the best choice, right? So here pH is 7.0, that means pH is less, that means it is a acidosis condition, right, as I discussed in this slide. So this is a condition of acidosis. So let me write here that this is a condition of acidosis. Now which one of these two fits in this acidosis? We have to find out that one, right? So here PCO2 is 45. What I told, that your PCO2, if it is more than this value, right, more than this value, then it is respiratory acidosis, isn't it? Yes, nice. So this one fits with it, right? So we can say, also we will look at the bicarbonate as well. Bicarbonate, it's given here 30, correct? And I told you that if bicarbonate is more, it is metabolic alkalosis, is not it? See, so what I will write here in such scenario, this much I understood that this is respiratory acidosis. This fits with it, right? Because this is acidosis and this is acidosis condition. So this is respiratory acidosis, and this one is metabolic alkalosis, right? So this condition is respiratory acidosis with compensatory metabolic alkalosis, because metabolic alkalosis doesn't fit with the condition, doesn't fit with the pH says something is going towards the acidosis side, and we found that something is respiratory, so, and this one is going to the opposite direction in the alkalosis part, so obviously this is compensating that acidosis. Are you understanding it? Right. Details I have discussed it in my another video of acid base disorders, which is there in the YouTube. I will tell you to attend that session. So I gave there 4-5 examples, so that thing will be absolutely clear, right? Whatever that doubts you have in this video, it will not remain like that. It will be absolutely clear. This concept is very essential in every exam. It's given, right? Of course, in some scenarios you have to calculate it, but see, pen and paper are usually not provided in so many exams, right? It is a CBT based exam, right? So this method is the best. In quick time you can diagnose the condition, right? Also with this I will like to discuss with you about this one, an important concept of anion gap. This is also important. See, you have to understand the normal Belus first. First of all, what is anion gap? See, anion gap is number of cations minus, they say, as unmeasured anions. Say anions. See, when we say as cations, we usually take sodium ion only because it's the major cation. We don't take other cations usually because these are, it is the major one, so we take only sodium. And while we take anions, we take all the negative charge things. Chloride maybe there, anything, any negative we will take it. So this we understood, right? Now talking about the normal Belus. See, normal anion Belus, normal anion gap is 10 to 12. When it is more than 12, it becomes metabolic acidosis. Metabolic acidosis, correct? And there are few conditions of metabolic acidosis which we have to see, and which I discussed in that segment only of acid base disorders. So this I want to discuss with you, but the conditions you have to see there, right? I discussed it in great details in my acid base disorder segment, so I will like you to go through that once, right? An important condition is your diabetic ketoacidosis, which is mentioned I think in every exams, right? Diabetic ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis. So don't remember this, don't forget this one, right? So you should go once through that video. Okay, so I discussed 10 important things from general medicine, and I will take systemic sessions based on systems like cardiology, nephro, like these things, and I will take the important salient topics that has been asked, right? Or repeated topics, what I say, that are important. So join, right? And if you want any topics to take, you can mention that in a comment box or in my Insta, right? I will take it, right? So okay, bye, take care, thank you.